Okay, so the production want you open your camera now, please, because we have to set up the screen. So you can just turn off your mic, but turn your camera on, please. Thank you very much.
Je lui ai dit, mais ça c'est stupide parce que.
Ah oui, c'est sûr.
Parce que j'ai dit, si l'autre il fait du bruit, tu peux parler.
Okay, and during the conference, the production want you open your mic and let them open because the speaker can speak with you at any time. Okay, thank you.
Hello, Sarissa. We are gonna start very soon, so can you turn on your camera, please? Thank you very much.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today to discuss social movements and art on chain. I'm joined here today on stage and online by some of the leading voices of the NFT art space, which is very exciting. We have Sarisa Kojima calling in from Thailand, Annika Meyer from Berlin, and Anya Catherine Dejati, the artist duo behind Operator. So before we begin, I'd like to maybe spend a few minutes just introducing yourselves. Maybe we can start with Sarisa, then Annika, and then Operator.
Hi, I'm Sarisa Kojima. I'm half Thai, half Japanese, currently based in Thailand. I'm a digital artist as well as illustration and manga.
Annika?
Good morning, Paris. Hi, Nisha. Hi, Anya. Hi, everyone. Good to see you. Yeah, my name is Annika. I'm a curator and writer. I'm based in Hamburg. And my background, I'm actually an art historian, but very early on I got interested in digital art and through Instagram in artists working with social media as a medium. And I think at some point all of us who have a background in the digital art got introduced to NFTs, and that's how I started working with galleries, platforms, artists in the NFT space on projects such as with Anya and Dija on the project Unsigned, or with Marina Abramovic on her project earlier this year. I think that's basically it.
Good morning. I'm Dija.
And I'm Anya.
So Anya and I have a collaborative practice bringing together performance art, immersive environments, both physical and digital, often simultaneously, and technology. So, you want to add anything?
We're from LA, now living in Berlin, and after 6 years of working together on more large-scale environment and performance projects, we started incorporating the blockchain and NFTs into our practice starting last year, so about 1 year ago, which led to the project I think we're going to be focused on today, Unsigned with Annika.
Great, thank you. So I'm just going to ask a few questions about previous projects just to set the scene. Sarisa, from what I've understood from speaking to you is that when you started getting into NFTs, you started realizing its potential for, to change and to impact your local artistic community and also your practice. I was wondering if you could let us know a bit how NFTs or the NFT art space has impacted you and your local artistic community, and maybe talk a bit about Sweaty NFT.
Yes, sure. At first, when I start with the art career, it's not really successful. I mean, like 6-7 years ago. So I would stop and go back to the corporate job and stuff like that. So I save up money, and then I found NFT. It's kind of like I'm able to connect with the art world again. So it's open like the new world to me. So and be able to like find a new audience and stuff like that. So I'm finally be able to connect with the art world and connect with the new artists that I don't know, like the whole world, and especially in Thailand. So people really struggle with being an artist and as a career or like earn money. So we figured out that and tried to gather together and try to figure out what is NFT. At first, people barely don't know, about the technologies, but they're helping out. So like 1.5 years ago, I start from zero that I don't understand, like how I'm gonna use this, especially people in my community right now in Thailand. The economy is totally different, and the society don't expect that artists gonna become like a career or the job that will provide, for people. So I will listen to so many Thai artists that they don't have opportunity to sell their art or like reaching out to the international stage. So when this NFT happened, many artists are able to connect with another part of the world. And they also became like more open-minded about NFT and to learn languages, especially like to learn to connect with people, because they have this eager, like, okay, people interested in art, they're able to sell art, they want to learn to get into the opportunity, the new opportunity. So they start learning language, they're learning how to market, learning how to sell their art or like present their art in English. So yeah, that's what happened in the community. And then me and my partner are from Puerto Rico, but he's American. So we figured out about the tools that will help the artists. And at first it's about smart contract. We start kick up a little bit with Tezos smart contract in March. We received the grant from TZ APEC, which is the Tezos Asia Pacific. And we start working on Tezos smart contract and build the tools for artists. I'm not 100% like a developer, but I have a little bit of this, those, that about UI, UX design. So I would just partner up with my partner and making this tool called Sweaty NFT. Currently, it's under construction, but we try the beta test with try to help people launching the project, because we know many people in Southeast Asia still have like a economy problem and they need support on that. So that's what I do and what happened in Thai, in Southeast Asian economy, creative industry as well.
Amazing. Yeah, I think we're going to touch upon those points a bit later on today. But now talking about the Unsigned collection. So Operator, you recently launched this collection in collaboration with Annika, and we're all here today. Can you tell us a bit about the project and how it was conceived?
Sure, I'll take this. So we were at a dinner and there was an article in The Guardian that had just come out, and there's a researcher, Dr. Helen Gorel, who's at the University of Dundee, I believe, and she has a book called Women Can't Paint, which is about gender inequality in the art world. And one of the findings that was mentioned in this Guardian article that was just circulating a few days before was that when a male artist signs their artwork, the value of that artwork goes up. And when a woman artist signs their artwork, the value actually goes down. So the signed version, the female signature, actually devalued the artwork. It cost less than an artwork that wasn't signed. And this was something that we read, and it was just kind of like a gut punch. We were like, how can this be? You know, it's supposed to be a moment of pride when you're signing an artwork and you're attaching it to your being and you've just worked on it. And so this just seemed so frustrating and wrong. And we were all at dinner and we're like, you know, we need to raise the value of women's signatures. We should be selling the signatures. And this is me, Deja, and Annika sitting at dinner. We're like, we're going to start selling female artist signatures to raise the value. And so literally the next day, that's what we did. And we did extend it. It's a collection of 100 women and non-binary artist signatures. And while the research was about male artist signatures versus female artist signatures, we feel like just because the research isn't there doesn't mean that the privilege of the male signature also is probably affecting non-binary people as well. So we extended it to include non-binary individuals. So it's a collection of 100 signatures, which is also the collection itself we see as a conceptual artwork, raising the symbolic and literal value of the signatures.
And how were the artists selected for, how did you select the 100 signatures? Maybe Annika, you want to answer that?
Yeah. So maybe one thing that might be interesting to mention, because at the dinner guests were artists, curators, and just people from the cultural scene in Berlin. And we were asked to sign an edition, a print edition, during that dinner. And there were men and women. And then I joked, well, as women, we shouldn't sign the edition, because otherwise the price would go down, right? According to that article. So that's how the idea came together, because out of a joke and out of us like really being asked to sign something, and then reading this a couple of days prior and thinking, well, what we now do with just a pencil and a piece of paper might actually have an impact. And when it comes to choosing the artist, 100 we try to, since it's NFTs, we focused on female and non-binary artists from the NFT space, or artists with a background in digital art and net art, such as Liz from Net Art, from the iconic net art duo Übermorgen. For example, her. Or basically, but we basically try to bring the whole NFT space together. 100 might not be enough, but we had to make a cut at some point. And our idea is also to make this travel all over the world, in the form of installation through institution. And we showed it, I think, when was that? 2 months ago or 1 month ago, at a museum, Francisco Carolinum in Linz, during Ars Electronica. So we'd be happy to keep speaking about this topic because it's highly relevant.
Yeah, actually, the other day, Dita, we were talking about this project, and you mentioned you had heard or learned a lot of interesting things from the anecdotes that the artists were telling you as they were participating in the project. Could you maybe give us a few examples of what you learned?
Yes, so upon inviting folks to participate in Unsigned, often we received a response with a story and said, well, I would love to participate, and actually I'm so glad you're doing this project because I have been told that I could not be represented because collectors would be less likely to invest in my practice and purchase my works because later down the line it is assumed that I might have a child or I might get married, and therefore somehow I might not be taking my art practice as seriously, so my earning potential and their investment as a result would be sacrificed. And so we received many stories like this, or also I remember one artist who has, I won't name, but they have a alias that they use that is, I guess, ambiguous what their gender might be, and this was very much intentional, and they sell their works for quite a bit on Super Rare, and they said, I don't think if I were going by my birth name, which signifies that I am a woman, that I would be selling these works and being financially successful on Super Rare. So it's such a pleasure to finally be signing with my name in order to participate in raising the both symbolic and literal value of women artist signatures and non-binary artist signatures.
No, that's really shocking, and it highlights the importance of this project today. We think that we're beyond that, but we clearly are not. Sarisa, have you encountered any form of gender inequality in your practice?
Well, I really agree. I just want to talk about the Unsigned project. I didn't know that before, even you guys on Tezos, maybe like we're missing out like so many collection. But we was talking like several days ago about this, and I was like, oh my God, this is really cool, because I also having this kind of issue, like at first I'm a transgender, transgender female, and I was not like, I try not to say that on my bio because I'm worried that I'm gonna get a bad effect. But it's every time I try to talk on the space, my voice is different, and people were just questioning. They're not seeing my face, and sometimes they ignore me or something like that. It's happened quite a lot, but I try not to give up. It's just like the same situation. I have to survive too. I have to make money or whatever, successful in financial. So it's just forcing like that to like try not to tell. And finally I was just seeing more people, including Unsigned project, right? Like everyone start talk more about you should like just finally show yourself. But it is something that I would say like it's not people just so familiar with the certain culture about like okay this male artist doing male stuff, boy stuff, or like and on Twitter space, I'm on Twitter space a lot. They would call like a bro-yo culture because when you go to that social audio, they were just speaking something different. I don't even understand like right and that's kind of like they try to normalize that. So there's something like that. And I was just like, okay, it's fine. I cannot go to this space and understand the context. I already have like a problem understand English and this type of English. I totally don't get it either. Like, hey, bro, yo, and they say something different, right? So like, oh, I'm gonna start doing the space. It's just same with the Unsigned. Like we need to start raising a different thing if we want to if we want the something different, we have to create it or like make a new rule, make a new condition, raise awareness about. So I try to make this space about some LGBTQ some days with my friend. They're also from LA. Like we call like a LGBTQ body positive space every week. So to try to like make a safe space for people. But of course, it is I encountered that quite a lot also. Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. I wanted to talk about the technology, but actually maybe based on that, we can talk a little bit more about, in a way, the promise of what Web3 tries to represent. And Annika, you've moved from, let's say, more traditional art world, more now into the NFT space and Web3. Do you feel like there are any improvements or changes in the space, or are we replicating the same problems?
I think there are improvements, but then at the same time, there's sort of like also the same problems. I mean, it's definitely sort of not really easier, but artists now have the possibility to sort of take care more of their own career because they have through the blockchain and through marketplaces also such as Tezos and Object, an easy entrance level to actually, selling or trying to sell their work to an audience and getting in touch with collectors through Twitter. So that's definitely an improvement. And I know many artists who prior worked with brands have done day jobs as, very different day jobs. And they, can finally focus on their art practice. But then at the same time, I think if you really want to have a long-term career as an artist, there's at some point you have to start thinking about working with galleries. Artists get an interest in showing their work in museums. And that way, we might end up with very similar structures because I guess that's what my feedback from many artists I'm friends with, I work with, that it's a lot what they suddenly have to take care of, right? It's not just, I create art and that's about it. No, you create art, you have to publish it. And I mean, I remember when we started, it was like we were at the dinner and then we were not at the dinner anymore. And the next day we were just on the phone constantly, figuring out all the details, the pricing, the concept, the texts, just minting. I mean, that's like a lot of work. And then the pressure that comes with releasing a project, and artists are suddenly alone with all of that, right? And then they're on marketeer, they're on accountant, they're like everything. I think it's an improvement, but at the same time, it's also sort of like a burden because so many tasks are connected with it. And I think, what I expect that we're going to see maybe over the next 6 to 12 months, that artists start working, with galleries, will be represented because they simply, A, need help, and B, also need a feedback partner and someone they can rely on to help out with daily tasks or also strategic questions and things like that. And I already see that happening because artists basically figured out they're doing the job of the middleman themselves. So the NFT space was so proud of having gotten rid of the middleman without realizing, well, there's a reason for a middleman because they're actually doing quite useful things. So yeah.
Yeah, the idea of the middleman is an interesting one because it's the part of the promise of Web3 is kind of the way that artists that were maybe overlooked before finally found their space and their audience and could speak directly to their audience. And I Googled actually to prepare for this talk what the definition of social movement is, and I got a large group of people loosely coming together to achieve a particular goal, often related to social or political change. With that in mind, and with the promise of obviously a more equitable distribution of attention, wealth, finally attributing value to digital art, which was previously overlooked, would you maybe consider the NFT art space as a form of a social movement within the contemporary art scene? Or is that too much to ask from it?
I wouldn't say the whole scene is a movement, because I also think mixed into the artists that are, like Annika said, trying to build their careers and take steps to connect with their audience and make their life possible through the creation of their artwork, which there was never really doors available, especially in certain parts of the world. If you don't have access to networks where, you know, bigger galleries that can support you, there was no way for you to be sharing your art to people all over the world. So in that way, it's great. But I wouldn't say everything happening is part of a movement, because you also have people who are really just there to make money, and they don't really care about the social aspects or those doors being opened. It's more of an opportunity for like a new frontier. But I do think Web3's promises and the ideals that it wants to live up to with democratizing and decentralizing and all of this there's a lot of value. But I also think, like you mentioned, that it's like, who is it better for? And when we look at like Unicorn DAO's research on how much of the huge sums of money that are spent on NFT artists' work, that I think it was like 5% of that was going to women artists. And so when we look at that, it's like, yeah, it's amazing, it's a new frontier, it's the future, but like, whose future is it and who's being left out of that future? Whose work is actually being bought? So I think looking at that and saying, yes, it has all these values and it's improving on all of these issues, but what issues is it just kind of replicating, and how can we actually make the changes that it's making include everyone and lift everyone up, instead of just lift up the few who are already benefiting in Web 2 and in society generally.
And Sarisa, do you have anything to add from your experience about, you know, the distribution of attention and wealth and how that's impacted you?
I could say like I'm being here very seriously with the technologies. I would study a few more of blockchain and how it's gonna change a lot of transaction and stuff like that. But what I'm seeing nowadays is like artists and people try to merge the creative industry with the blockchain. That's very interesting. I'm still looking for another, step, or like the future of this, because it's not only right now it's limited to the digital art and everything has to sell in the form of the file. It's very small scale of the transaction that it can do, and the form of how we purchasing NFT. I just feel like when we go back to I think 14, 15 years ago, when we start having this social media, whatever, to connect, the career about YouTuber or like video or stuff like that, we don't have that career 14 years ago. And right now, after the Web 2 start, right, we have this content creator or any career that I never seen. like before. And if I grew up, if I was in high school and I know that they are this type of career, I might just like try, practice. But what I grew up is just, okay, artist, nurse, doctor, or like just a normal thing. But right now, it's so much opportunity. Same with the new generation that they are grow up right now. What is providing for them in the future of the Web3? It's beyond what we are doing right now. So what happened in our region is I'm going to many high school. I was just telling them like this is very different from when I grew up. You guys grew up with the internet. You get access to learn how to code, to learn how to, a new stuff, a new technologies. You guys know Bitcoin. You know how to trade. You know how to with the crypto thing. This is gonna be your future. That what I would tell like the young generation. It happened to be like some session just for young trans LGBTQ in the university and school. I'm just telling you like practice become our future because I'm too old to learn, but I try to learn more about this. I'm about to be 40 soon. And then you will be the next generation that will shape all this Web3, all this blockchain technology in the transaction. So I put that in their hand as well because it's going to become more probably in the next 10, 4 years. Same with when we got Web2 and social media and stuff like that. And right now we have like career for that type of service. But I do put some hope because in Southeast Asia, we behind a lot of things in the Western in terms of the art, our creative industry. People here would just not really go to gallery and like, oh, want to buy stuff like that. We have totally different culture. But since the NFT start, I think people start looking into creative industry in a different way. And people were just more open mind about how the artist or art working. Not in Japan. Japan, it's another thing. But in Southeast Asia, it's very interesting that most of people were just working for another company or another big project in the Western world. So they're kind of like a supplier. And people just do that because they accept this cheap salary or cheap money, I don't know, fiber or whatever that people pay. But this type of thing happening, and I think people will learn how to like put the value more on themselves because now they learn, they see like the world is connect and they see how other people do it. They want to try to improve themselves and like learn more English, learn how to communicate, be more like a, mature, more like professional, how they do it and stuff like that. So, but I still put a lot of hope on these NFT technologies. Right now, my partner, he's not an artist. So he tried to working on another project, kind of like working with a hospital, like clinical trial, try to use blockchain and NFT in those industry. So I would see like how like this is going to be the future. I just really don't know why, but I think that you and I like never have to connect or get to know each other. But right now we have this thing called NFT, and we just happen like, okay, right now, oh, I see new face, I see new people every day. So I think it's a good start for this industry, and it's happened to be with the creative, with art, because it's the thing that we are. It's kind of like help us get through the pandemic moment as well, and it's the thing that people really appreciate and see that this is beautiful. It's the most easiest to connect people together.
Thank you. Yes. So yeah, the technology is certainly at the core of it. And actually, going back to the Unsigned collection, I don't know who wants to answer this, but why did you feel it was important to use Web3 technology and launch the project as an NFT project?
To go back to this dinner that is becoming to hold a lot of mythology in it. So there was something at that dinner that kind of, and Annika, I think you were also driving this, which was speed. Okay. And the ability, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts as well, because coming from your background in the traditional art world, how long does it take to ideate a project, design that project, put that project into a production pipeline, market that project, find a home for that project, an institution, and how long does it take to build awareness around this project? Now, we happened to do this in the course of a 2.5, 3-hour dinner where we didn't eat much, but we were very productive.
We left hungry.
We left hungry. By the end, we had named the project. We had come up with the design of the project, because, you know, if you're going to sell signatures, there's many ways you could sell these signatures, right? You could, or how would they look? Are they all black ink on white paper? Do we allow them to use different textures of paper? Do we allow them to use different colors? Do we allow them to use digital signatures or only handwritten ones? And all of these, I mean, it seems like it's quite simple in the output, but there were a lot of constraints we needed to decide right then and there. But back to the technology, I think we had the opportunity to immediately have a platform where we could mint the artworks. We could tap into our existing communities to immediately create awareness through the project. And it was, you know, Annika's community, it was Operator's community, it was the Tezos community, and the other artists who and creators who are building platforms. FX Hash was there that night, and through that, everyone at that dinner was able to create a project by the next morning.
The next day, with the first 4 were minted literally the next day.
Yes, and sold within minutes, right? And every week we sold 12 signatures, and through the network effect of the communities, of the participants as well, who were also selling artworks of their own, these signatures were sold out in a few minutes. And anyone who knows our practice knows that we aren't a huge fan of this sort of sellout engineering, but I think it is quite a statement of how much we were able to accelerate this project with, you know, crypto Twitter, with you know, Object and Tezos as the platform to quickly make this project something that wasn't even a thought prior to going into the dinner. And the next morning, we started an 8-week project that ended in many museum acquisitions, as well as a show at Francisco Carolinum that ended up in the permanent collection. So Annika, as you know, with your experience in the traditional art world, have you seen a project like this start and happen and end in an 8-week period and end in a museum collection?
Not to my knowledge. Maybe that happened prior. I'm pretty sure maybe somehow, maybe not. Yeah, because that's also what blockchain makes possible, right? I mean, for this project, the creation of value was extremely important. Because, you know, there's, men sign an artwork, price goes up, women sign, price goes down. So we really needed to make a statement with actually selling the signatures. And that's what blockchain immediately makes possible, because otherwise you would have needed to find a gallery or speak with your gallerist. I mean, we could, as artists and all, because I'm in this project, I'm sort of like an artist because we came up with
Not
the
sort
concept
of,
and everything
you are.
together. Yeah, I am, yes, because we did the concept together, so yeah. But I mean, during the dinner, you know, because you also asked about Web3, I mean, there were many people from the community, as Dija has just mentioned. Paul from FX Hash was there. Everyone from Tezos, such as Diane and Reed, were there, but also Matt Dryhurst and Holly Herndon. Yeah, and they figured out that we started working on something. And then, yeah, everyone basically who was at the dinner ended up, you know, helping us or being part of the first round of promotion with a blurb. And we actually didn't really tell them what the whole project was about, but I guess you all know blurbs on books, right? So we told them, yeah, we just basically need a blurb from you to you at this point unknown project, but it was clear for everyone on Twitter that this was actually the case. So everyone was super excited what would come the next day. But yeah, that speed, I think, blockchain made it possible. And I also remember that Anya and Ija, when we were on the phone, the next day, you know, figuring out all the details, because you also need to take care of license agreements and contracts with the artists. We had to speak with lawyers and so on. And both of them said, well, we've never done a project, you know, usually it takes, and that's like actually the case, right? You usually think weeks and months about the project and plan everything, but we were like, no, we have to act quickly because the article in The Guardian has just been published, and a lot of people on Twitter were like really angry and frustrated about the whole thing. I spoke with Lynn Hirschman-Leeson. She's one of the pioneers, or the media art pioneer at this year's Ars Electronica at Art NFT Linz 3-day conference and exhibition I curated for Francisco Carolinum in Linz. And it's like really depressing and frustrating to hear that, we also spoke about this topic and how difficult it has been for her as a woman artist to be taken serious, and they called her a crazy woman and so on and so on. And then I simply pulled Anya on stage to also tell Lynn about some of the stories we have heard when artists actually confirmed and said, well, it's a very important project, and like basically not much has changed except it's now possible, but also social media had made it possible, right? When women weren't dependent, or women photographers weren't dependent on men, right? Prior, women were basically the subject in photographs, and through social media, it has become way easier, to promote and start a career as a photographer. If we think about Avida Biström, who is also part of the Unsigned project, or someone like Leah Schrager, suddenly there's not only a male gaze, but also female gaze, and technologies make such things and improvement possible.
So would you say, just pushing that argument a little further, do you feel like Web3 technology is facilitating the creation and distribution of socially engaged art? Open question.
I wouldn't say that all art that's using NFTs is socially engaged, because you still also see a lot of very overpriced, hypersexualized, bad photography of women who probably don't know that their photo is being sold, shot by men, then circulating in these platforms. So I wouldn't say that just because it's using the technology, it's by default socially engaged, because there's a lot of stuff that I wish there was more reflection and conversation and questions around consent and the muse and the photographer and like traditional gender dynamics. I think I wish didn't have a position in the NFT and Web3 art space still happening. But I think there are a lot of projects that are able to exist, and if they're resonating with people, do get shared and do start bringing people together and do start conversations that might never have institutions allowing them to exist. But if they have the right people behind them and they have a message that's resonating, are able to kind of like have a life of their own and turn into a movement. And I think with Unsigned, and when we saw the title of the panel today, thinking about Unsigned as a movement, it's funny because, as we said, it was like a conceptual project, but then also we saw like 3 weeks after Unsigned, there was several different artists that had all participated in Unsigned, like Nancy Baker, Cahill, and Connie Bakshi, and Sasha Stiles were all in LA at the same time. And then they got a photo together, and they're like the Unsigned crew, and I was like, oh, this is so cool. So like the people, the artists in the community suddenly then were in the same city, and they all had this link to each other. And I also think that's something, and coming from the dance world, and even I feel like pre-Web3 NFT art world, we weren't, like getting coffee and drinks with other experiential installation artists, or like in the dance world it feels more competitive where, you know, women are like, she got that role and I didn't get that, and it feels very one-to-one, this scarcity mentality of not wanting to bound together. And I think what's really great in what Unsigned does is it really showed the power of like what happens when all of us are supporting each other. We're not like, we're just going to promote our stuff, but we're like, this woman's work is absolutely amazing. I'm going to share her work with my collectors. Like the way that we're bounding together, we're sharing resources, networks, and supporting each other's projects is something I've really never seen in the dance world, in our past practice. And I think it's very special, and I hope that continues to grow because we're way stronger, not to be cheesy, but we're way stronger together, and patriarchy's best tool is for women to be competing with each other and putting each other down. And our best way to move forward is to ignore that socialization.
I guess the definition that I said earlier about social movement could be more geared towards the Unsigned collection than the wider NFT space. We have 5 more minutes left. I don't know if there's any questions from the audience. Otherwise, we can just,
So I absolutely adore the Unsigned concept. So I think it's great. I'm just interested in whether you have like experienced pushback from the art world and the activist world about NFTs as a platform or a medium, because I have seen a lot of like anti-NFT sentiment especially in queer and activist spaces, and also, to be honest, a lot of like reactionary and very hostile sentiment from like the patriarchy in NFT spaces and blockchain spaces. So I'm just wondering what your experience was.
Yes, we did receive some pushback, but not too much. But I think one of the most interesting aspects, we had one conversation with an artist who called us immediately and said, I don't want to participate because I don't think my signature will sell, and part of this is because I'm not part of the younger generation, and the hot, cool, artists that are, this person who we were having this conversation with, she was saying, well, a lot of these top-selling artists are my students, actually, and, everyone wants to talk to me because I'm an old girl, but, but when it comes down to it, no one's going to buy my signature. And almost this idea and this mentality of ageism within the crypto and NFT art space only supporting, the success of younger artists. So, this artist's signature did sell, by the way, and they did end up participating, but it was interesting. I know it's maybe not the exact kind of idea you had in mind in your question, but I think it was interesting the sort of notion of where does the success align with, and in what age groups and types of artists as well.
Annika, did you hear pushback for using NFTs at all for this project? I don't remember any.
No, we haven't, but I guess that's the main reason is because I think it's obvious that it's part of the concept, right? We couldn't do this project without blockchain and also without a green blockchain such as Tezos. I think that's why we didn't receive any negative feedback, but maybe something completely different. And also back to a question prior about social media, social movements and the blockchain. I think what blockchain is especially good for when it comes to fundraisers and so on, you can do them quickly. Social media channels are the promotion tool, and people who donate can actually see where the money goes to, right? I curated, for example, the tribute to Herbert W. Franke, and it's not really a fundraiser. I mean, the main idea wasn't this being a fundraiser, but Herbert W. Franke, the pioneer of computer art, died in the ZKM in Karlsruhe. He houses, they have his archive in-house, and they don't have the funds to take care of digitizing his manuscripts and at 1,800. So when I had the idea to do a tribute, Susanne, his wife, and I had the idea to connect it with a little fundraiser, because 20,000 euro are needed to digitize the 1,800 manuscripts. And then we said, well, if more money will be donated, let's just find a foundation in South Africa that gives access to kids and young adults to technology. And yeah, that way, you know, we can clearly show where the money goes to, right? Everyone sees the money goes to the wallet of the foundation, and then they will see where the transactions go to. And so on and so on, how much the artists donate, for example, and so on. So the blockchain is actually making these things very transparent, and you actually know where your money goes to, right? If you donate something. So I guess, and it's quick. It's really quick.
I think we're out of time. Maybe can we spend a few more minutes?
Question from Roger.
Hello. I think you've given me schizophrenia. I'm both deeply depressed and deeply ecstatic. I was walking down this bank in 1968, throwing stones at the police. Women's liberation. Here we are in 2023 with the same problem. Maybe we need to redesign human nature. How do you raise children so the label man, woman, your age, ageism in my case, the problem is so deep in human nature that we need to modify it? I don't know. Anyway, thank you for making me schizophrenic.
Thanks,
Thank you, Roger. You're welcome.
Well, I think with this we can wrap up. Thank you so much for that concluding remark on our behalf. Thank you everyone for joining. I hope you enjoyed the talk.
far back. Your last name Benillouche? Asson Benillouche. Asson Benillouche. Hello? It should be. Yeah, it should be. Hi, everyone. So we're going to start our next session, which is titled Permanent Art Collections in the Blockchain Age. My name is Marissa True, and I am joined by none other than Valerie Asson Benillouche, and you are the founder of Galerie Charlot.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the invitation.
So for this one-on-one discussion, I want to venture across a variety of different subjects. Firstly, into your personal backstory, and then I'd like to talk a bit more about what Galerie Charlot is doing within the blockchain space and some of the more recent developments. And then we want to stem into this notion of the role of permanent art collections in this space, because the notion of a permanent art collection is quite a traditional one. So how it manifests in, you know, a Web3 world is arguably quite different. But before we get to that point, like I said, we'll start from the very beginning. Can you first share a bit more about your personal journey first into the contemporary art world?
So I always really was interested in art since I think I bought my first piece of art I was 18, so it was not yesterday but before. And so it's something that really happens to be an old passion. And then I went to different kind of area, like design, photographies, and then I was also helping my clients. I was working in one time I was working in interior design, and I was helping my clients to find different kind of artworks for their places. So I was going to the galleries and to the fair before opening my own galleries. And why I opened my galleries, because when I was doing all this tour, trying to find different kind of artworks, I really discovered all the digital art world, and I really enjoy it. I think it was so different from what I saw. It doesn't mean that I didn't like paintings and drawings and everything. I still love everything. But it was something that we haven't seen so much. And I think it was very interesting, and it's always very interesting in the art world to go on, not to be stable. So everyone knows what is drawings, what is sculpture, paintings, and some of them a little bit of videos. But then you have a lot of more, because the artists, they always take new tools and play with it to create. And I think that was really the point, just to show what these artists are working on with the new tools. So my whole story was my passion for art for a long time, then photographies, design, interior designers, and then my gallery, because I thought it was something normal to show something that you couldn't find in different galleries everywhere. So I opened this gallery at Galerie Charlot in 12 years ago in Paris. And I was showing, first of all, I was mixing paintings and digital art, because people didn't know at that time what was digital art. Something was like, what is digital art? It's not art. It's not material. It's something that you cannot touch. It's like a file, or it's too abstract. So the people were coming from different art world, and collectors, very classical paintings, drawings. But they were kind of interested also, because art collectors are always interested in what's happening around, even if they don't buy. They want to see, they want to talk about it. And sometimes it takes time to understand, to like, to know what you like. So you have to initiate your eye to different kind of artwork. And so they came to the gallery for the paintings, but they discover one by one different artists, digital artists, like videos, like interaction, like generative artworks, like augmented reality, and all this kind of digital art.
So in that way, Galerie Charlot was the motivation behind its creation was to bridge the conversation between different kinds of emerging artistic mediums and to show that there was a level of continuity between them, and to also, I guess, educate people into how they can come to appreciate these new mediums. Because as you said, I think a lot of digital art gets minimized or dismissed because of the format that it comes in, i.e., a JPEG or some file on a computer, which is to dismiss, the level of consideration and effort and intent behind its design. So how have you stumbled across those conversations having launched Gallery Charlot, and how do you help to encourage people to understand a bit more about, this very misunderstood realm of art?
Well, it took times first and patience. So it's, I think galleries, we have also a role of education somehow. So I did a lot of presentation, explanation, and trying to explain to the different people and collectors that was also as movie, as videos at that time, or if you can really even compare when all the impressionism movement in paintings were accepted at that time. Everyone was saying, wow, that's terrible, it's not paintings, you don't see anything, it's not real, it's not, And suddenly now, everyone is just dying for it. So it takes time, and you have to see many things. And of course, in those kind of artists, you have, good and bad, it's stupid, but the one who are going through times and develop. So yeah, the conversation was not easy to find.
How does that conversation differ between, institutional partners that you work with versus a spectator at the gallery? How do you differentiate the conversation between someone who understands it on more of an industry level versus, an individual art appreciator?
Well, I always present digital art as like a painting, but in movement. So when I think the display is very important also. So it means that if you show something in a bad way, like with something not really qualitative, so you need a good screen, you can make a frame around the screen. So suddenly it happens to be like paintings in movement. So you can live with it. And I remember this collector, he was a very classical collector with paintings and everything since a long time. And he said to me, well, Valerie, what do you think? Do you think I'm going to sit in front of my videos and look at it? And I said to him, do you sit in front of your paintings and look at it? So you just live with it, You just, it's a painting in movement, or it's a still image, it's a whatever, but it's a part of your environment. So you just enjoy it. Sometimes you look at it, sometimes you don't, sometimes you forget. You can even turn it off. So it's a different way of living with art. And this is something that you have to get used to it. And now he has like a bunch of artists, digital art. So it's very funny because finally he find a way to live with it and to enjoy.
I think that's actually been a very pervasive theme across many of these discussions, is how we best consume digital art, because it is consumed differently to, a painting on a wall or a photograph that's framed. But then one thing that's critical here is we have that sort of, hurdle, and then we bring in the blockchain dimension, where it adds an additional layer, because not only is it another way of consuming art, but also the style of art that exists on there is somewhat different. So how did Gallery Charlot first start to incorporate blockchain art into the gallery experience? And what was your first approach when you stumbled across it?
Well, I have to say that...
An NFT technology, what did you think?
I think it was a chance, actually. I think it was a chance because hopefully, it's very strange, because when NFT with blockchain and all the system of certificate and everything appear, it bright up the digital art. The classical, we can say, classical digital art. So it's really make the light on digital art, which was not NFT. So this is a positive way to look at it. And then blockchain bring different kind of advantage. So you have the certificate, of course, you have all the historical part of the work of the NFT, so like who buy it, how much he buy it, and all the different contract. And what I think is very, very important, and it's really a revolution, it's the artist has a percentage for the second market, which is not actually natural in the art market. So I think all this new technology brings a lot of new things and a new way of looking to art. But it doesn't mean that digital art disappeared. It's just a complementary. Because digital art, for example, we can say now the classical digital art, which is funny to say, but classical digital art, we have certificate, we have all the documentation for the artworks, how it works, how you can display on whatever. But you don't make, I mean, for example, if you buy an NFT, you can share your NFT with everyone. You are the owner, but you can share with everyone. If you buy a digital piece of art, you have it at your place, but you don't really share it with everyone, just your friend, when you invite people. So it's a different way of enjoying, sharing, and I don't say that it's better, it's just different. So it's really it brought something very important. It's really a revolution in all kind of sense.
So then when it came to the curatorial process of sourcing not only digital artists, but now blockchain native artists, how did you approach that? Was the process similar? Was it different? Did you feel compelled to evaluate works in different ways?
It's exactly the same, I have to say. I just looked to the artists. When I began to open my gallery, I was trying to find the artists, the digital artists. Most of the time they were doing festival. They were not in galleries. There were no galleries for digital art. I mean, at 12 years or 15 years ago. So I was going to different kind of festival, to different kind of exhibitions, but like underground exhibitions or, you know, this kind of places. And now, I mean, NFT or digital art NFT art, it's on the different marketplace. You meet one artist and the other one, and which is very encouraging. It's also creating a new community of art, and this community of NFT is something very strong, because the people in the community. So you're part of community. You're part of this NFT community. So. The people are helping each other all the time, trying to say, well, this artist is really nice, look at it, and the links are very easy, and it's very interesting to see how people can be helpful to each other, because somehow I think we lost that a few years ago, and we get it back with this new system, and I really think it's a very positive way to see art.
So I guess in that sense, the blockchain art or the blockchain digital art culture is a lot more collaborative, perhaps slightly less competitive, because they understand that the playing field is relatively even, or should be relatively even, for every artist to succeed in their own right.
Yeah.
So then in that, when you find these artists collaborating with one another and engaging with one another, do you find that there is any resistance to the idea of adopting blockchain technology, or is there a very open attitude towards how they can harness it for their own work? Does the relationship go both ways?
Well, it depends the artists. Some of them are just really scared about new technology, and they say, well, it's a crypto money, of course, it's not really stable, but I think creators, they're always interested in all kind of what's happening new. So I think they're very open in any kind of way. And also with this community system, they can find help to to mind their works and to mind it in a good way, in the best way. So, but in 2 or 3 years, I mean, the development was incredible. I remember 2 years or 3 years ago, it was very difficult to mind generative artworks. It was not easy. And now everyone is doing it. So, you know, in 2 or 3 years, it's so the artists are always interested, and they help each other to learn how to do it the best way.
So you can kind of trust the culture of experimentation that underpins a lot of these artists' approach.
Yeah.
So then, again, coming back to Galerie Charlot's role as an institutional player, how does this conversation map onto the institutional side of things and encouraging other galleries to perhaps, you know, foray into this space? And is there resistance on that side of things?
Well, I think the other galleries are just a little bit scared, as they were not really into digital art. You know, I'm in digital art since so many years now, so it was normal. It was my way. You know, NFT was there, so it was something that I had to find. Actually, the most difficult thing was to find the place of the gallery inside this new era. You know, it's just because first of all it was, well, now the artist doesn't need any more the galleries. Okay, some of them never need any galleries. It's okay. I mean, there's a place for everyone. And also it appears that some artists who are just in a corner of a world somewhere, and they could never show their own work, and they were a very good artist. I mean, this is something that happens to help them to show their work. And they didn't have any galleries, of course. So where was the place of the gallery? And that was something that it took me time to find the right place. And actually, I think the galleries has to help, of course, the artists, but also the collectors to understand what is the future, how they can go on with a collection, how they can enrich their own experiences. And this is the role of the gallery. Because when you go to a very big marketplace, I won't say anyone, but you can see so many artworks. It's difficult to choose. You need time, you need experience. So as a gallery, my role was more to curate and to select, like a pre-selection. So it would be easier for the collectors to go and to appreciate or say, no, I don't like, I like. You know, it's quicker and yeah.
So I guess the gallery continues to act as a bit of a filter between, you know, the mass sea of the artists that we have in this space. Yeah. And I think it's immensely encouraging to see the volume of people who are participating and act as an expert lens upon which we can select, you know, artists of quality or artists that are making a particular statement or are, you know, releasing particularly groundbreaking works.
Yeah, yeah, it's we help. We try to help the selection.
But also in that Galerie Charlot's own role is evolving over time because it has also developed an NFT marketplace. So can you tell us a bit more about the motivation behind that?
Well, I think when I begin something, I really like to make it the full possibility to be very professional. So the thing is, so I was talking about the role of the gallery. So the role of the gallery was to curate this NFT artwork and to present some different art that you couldn't find everywhere, because otherwise it doesn't have any sense if you can find a piece here and everywhere. I mean, so that's why I created this marketplace, because I think it was a good idea to have a selection and the exclusivity of an artwork. So that's why I created this art marketplace, and we open on the 29th of October.
So just around the corner.
The auctions will begin for, yeah.
So what actually went into its design to differentiate it from other NFT marketplaces that exist currently?
Sorry, I didn't understand what you said.
When you designed the marketplace,
Yeah.
what did you factor in that would help differentiate it from other marketplaces? What would encourage an artist to sell their works on Gallery Charlot's?
Well, the look of the marketplace, it was, we made it with Scheme and Paris Première Gallery. So all this technician helps to create a very sober and very gallery way marketplace. So it's very simple. And so the selection, the curation, and the artists also have a percentage on the second market, of course. And we have a small percentage for Planète Mer, which is an association who defend all the sea and oceans everywhere in the world. So it's a position, you know, and also we exhibit the work inside the gallery. So we make exhibitions with NFT and digital art, because NFT is a part of the digital art. So it's easy to make a very nice exhibition if you have, if you are used to digital art. So we present at the gallery an exhibition with NFT and digital art, selling in euro and Tezos.
Right, so there's the end-to-end element where someone who comes to experience the art can also consider purchasing it, and so it takes it from, I guess, the commercial opportunity for the artist is sort of built into the experience in that way.
Yeah.
And as you said, the artwork is sold both in euros and in Tez. What was the rationale behind, using Tezos to build upon?
Yeah, well, Tezos was one of the first crypto who just thought about the word. So, so they were less energivore, which is something that decide a lot of artists also to choose Tezos. And also they don't ask so much money for minting, so which is also a respect for the artist who's trying to sell their own works. So that was the two first thing, and then now really it's, Tezos is the money for art. So anyway, so.
And have you found that you are sourcing a lot of artists from Tezos ever since you began incorporating yourself into this community? Or are you trying to encourage artists that you encounter to consider Tezos to mint their work upon?
Well, I have to say the both. Yeah. As we were talking about, we have this community of NFT. So as soon as you get into the Tezos community, then you have all the artists of Tezos who said, "Oh, you should see this artist. He's a very good one. He has very nice things, and he's in Tezos." So he's like a bench of different people. So it's really interesting to see how it works. But also, I did some event in February in Unvirtual. I don't know if you heard about it. It was like a big event in Virtual on the Ile Saint-Louis, and it was only about NFT, and it was at that time not in Tezos. And now I'm trying to bring the artist from this event who was not in Tezos into Tezos. So, and they're very, very happy about that. So it's the both. Really, artists are always open to see what's happening around.
So I guess in that it was a bit of a positive feedback loop where artists beget more artists because they see the community that thrives there.
Yeah.
And then as we were relating to much earlier in this conversation, there is that culture of experimentation. So it's always an attitude of, well, why not try that as well?
Yeah. Always open. The artists are always searching. It's a life of research.
So then how do you envision Gallery Charlot's role on the blockchain as it goes into the future? Because obviously, the creation of an NFT marketplace is the first step into this foray. So is there anything you've already got planned, or what is your bigger picture vision for how you want to see Gallery Charlot exist in this space?
Well, I think it's really important for me to say that the NFT art is really part of the digital art. So the gallery would run into this idea of mixing different kind of possibility to buy art. So you can buy in different crypto or different money, and I don't really like when you make group. You know, like it's sectors, and I think it's more interesting to have a view of all bunch of different kind of art. So the gallery, I would really say that I still want to have the possibility to mix everything as soon as it's still digital and something that goes on for the future. And of course, art is always into researching to go further in our idea, our dreams. Art is something that we live with because it's something that helps everyone. So it could be in any kind. Maybe we have crypto today, but maybe in 10 years we will have something else. And we have to go on because it's something that helps us to go on and to dream and to imagine and to share.
Mm-hmm. So it's about being open to any possibility in whatever form that it takes.
Yeah.
And so to take this conversation now to this idea of the role of permanent art collections within this space, because I mean, that idea has only started to form in recent times. The Tezos Foundation recently created its permanent art collection, which is curated by Misan Harman. So in your view, what is the role of having a permanent art collection exist in this digital space?
It's a major role. I have to say, it's a major role. When I began to open the gallery, it was very interesting because digital art was not really famous. And the first collectors were private collectors. It's always like that. The private people are more interested in new things. They take risk more than a foundation or more than institutions. So it's always very funny to see how the people, we have a very strong power and we don't know it. We have a very strong power as individual, personal people to make the art word go on. So it's very important that the personal people are buying and then the foundation see the people are buying, so they say, wow, that's interesting. And then the institution just wake up because all the people around wants to see different exhibitions and they want to discover something new. So I think foundations, personal collectors and institutions, their role is to bring everything new every day. So this is the role of those institutions and foundations.
So to summarize, it adds a layer of legitimacy, but it also provides some kind of historical archive for how this space is developing over time. Mm-hmm. Would you agree?
Yeah.
And so then, how is there a difference between how a permanent collection in the blockchain space with NFTs exists as compared to a traditional permanent art collection?
Yeah. Well, as we said that NFT brings something very different, as you can share your collection. You can go everywhere. There's 2 points, very important. You can go everywhere with your collection. So if you travel around, you always have your collection with you. You can display you are in a hotel, you can display it on a screen, you can display it on your phone or in your tablets, everywhere. So which is something very important. It's a different way to live with your art. Because, for example, if you have a collection like a classical collection, okay, you have it on your wall in your place or in your office, whatever, which is really nice because you enjoy it every day. You can share it with your friends. But as soon as you go somewhere, you move, you go on holidays and whatever, you don't share it. It's something very personal. So NFT is something that you can go with, you move with your collection and you share it with someone. So you are the owner, but you share it with everyone. So it's even a philosophical way to collect somehow. And it's very different, it's very new.
And in that, displaying this art is of critical importance because the way you display it frames how someone actively is able to consume it. So what are sort of the things, given your background in presenting so many digital works, needs to be considered importantly so that we can see this work in the best light possible?
Like, you mean the way that we can, the best way to display it?
Yes.
I think each work has a different way to be displayed. So most of the time it's the artist, of course, who propose and, who think about how to display their own work because they really know and they imagine the work more on a screen or more like a still image or only on tablets or whatever, or the both. Could be print, could be on the screen. So I think the artists are the best, judge to know how it would be the best way to display it, because there's so many different kind of way to display. I mean, even projection could be very interesting. It could be very immersive. So you have NFT artworks could be incredibly interesting in immersive way. So it's more projection everywhere, or I think each work is something different.
So we have to rest in the authority of the creator in how they want to present their work best, and basically provide them with all the tools possible to make sure that can happen. But then on this notion of authority, of course, with the idea of a permanent art collection, there is the expert curator, the role of the curator in the entire exercise. And because this is a fairly new realm, who do we grant that authority to? How do we make sure that we select the right curators to develop these collections? And, do we think that curators of the traditional art world can easily convert their expertise into this space, or do we need to start incorporating other voices into this process?
I think it's very, it's always very interesting to have different curators, because you have different view. It's always nice to mix your ideas. When we talk to each other, we exchange ideas, and which is very, important for the evolution. Our evolution is also to exchange. So I don't agree with you, but it's nice because you have a different point of view. And for curating, it's exactly the same. So I have my test, and another curator has another test. It doesn't mean that it's not there's bad and good. It's different, and it's very interesting to mix all of that. And this is a point for the marketplace of the Galerie Charlot. I would invite different curators to curate on the marketplace different NFT artworks, because it's very important for me not to have only my eyes. It's very important to have different kind of opinion, test, and experiences.
So diversity is absolutely integral to this process, because again, if we go back to this idea that permanent art collections act as a kind of historical archive of the evolution of this space over time as it relates to art, then we need to ensure as many voices are represented as possible.
Yeah, it's very important to have all voices everywhere.
And in the early stages of this world, do you feel that we are doing a good job of that, or do we need to actively encourage more diversity in this space?
I think we need more diversity in space.
It was a bit of a loaded question.
Always need to open our mind and eyes.
So we have about 10 minutes on the clock, and I'd love to open up this one-on-one interview to the audience if there are any questions that rest there. Yes, we've got one right in the front.
Hi, my name is Sach. You've taken a profoundly deep view into the digital art space, not just NFT and all. And I'm wondering, one thing that I find amazing is especially as the NFT space is concerned, there is complete autonomy of the NFT space to exist outside of the traditional art space. And I think that has set up a unique opportunity to fundamentally challenge every single assumption, about how the traditional art business has worked. Do you agree? Do you think that is it are we ripe for that kind of discussion?
Like, you mean it's you're talking about the fact that the artists can exist by themselves?
Well, so I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
There is, let's say, a belief that to be an artist today, you need to have understood the history of art in the past, right? I would say, why? So what?
Yeah.
Right. But that's a very pronounced view. Let's say in the traditional art world, I think it's totally irrelevant in the digital art world, right? So I mean that's just an example, but those are I believe that we are ripe for that discussion. That every single basic assumption, every single foundational assumption that the traditional art world is sitting on, is ripe to be challenged. I'm not saying they should all be discarded, right? But they should be re-examined, re-debated, and then re-adopted if they're relevant, and if they're not, they're not.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's very good. Every time you have this kind of evolution, it makes you rethink how to manage, how to approach, and maybe also to clean up somehow. So it's like it's true that when NFT, for example, begins 3 years ago, it was like you had millions of things, and now it's clearing up. So it takes time, but of course, I mean, it's the same for galleries and for artists and for everything, any kind. So yeah, I think evolution is helping to see more clear, and to find different way of working and getting into art.
So to add to that, I think it's a bit of a natural selection process where, we have the level of awareness that we need to critically evaluate the relevance of particular dimensions of the art world and whether we want to take them with us or whether it's worth discarding or even reshaping in a way that is more valuable to artists as they exist across different mediums. So I think again, when it comes to a disruptive technology like blockchain, it's not to replace old systems, but it's given us the opportunity to redesign them in a new way. Yes, we have another question at the front.
Thank you, Valerie, for coming and speaking a bit more about Galerie Charlot. I'd love to ask you a little bit more now that you are launching your NFT platform as well. If you imagine other use cases for NFTs and blockchain for maybe works that are not NFTs, or are you keeping it, even though you will do exhibitions of classic digital art with NFTs, have you also thought of maybe applying NFTs to these classical digital artworks for the sake of provenance and having it on the blockchain? And could we even extend that to maybe if you were to have physical objects that are paintings or sculptures in the gallery as well, could you even extend NFTs to those physical artworks for the sake of integrating the technology in your gallery more holistically? What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, we are thinking about link the immaterial with material. So some artists are doing that. I mean, I'm just presenting. I'm an agent somehow. So really, again, the artists are creating something, piece of art, and they decide that this piece of art would be totally digital or digital plus print or sculpture, and that could be something happening on the marketplace of the gallery. Yes, we have that for on the 29th. You will see some digital with physical artworks. I mean, to purchase. Yeah.
So I think it goes in both directions.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we have, would you like to add anything else? We have another question up in the front.
Okay, so I'm Roger. I like the idea that the history of art is irrelevant to NFT art. I'm looking out of the window at bronze and stone sculptures. NFT art will not be available 500 years from now. Does that matter? So part of an artist's hope is to transmit to future generations their work. There is no way that NFT art will be available in 500 years. Does that matter?
Well, yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking, you know.
It doesn't matter, and we don't care about the survival of the art.
Well, I have another vision, maybe, but yeah. I think we have to live in the present, thinking about the future. Okay, but you still have this sculpture, the very old historical sculpture. But this is the point where all the evolution in arts appears. So the artist saw this kind of sculpture, like historical sculpture, and they go on, and now we have NFT in sculptures. So it's something like it's a cheminement, you know, it's like a way. So maybe it would not exist in 500 years. I don't know. But I still like and enjoy every moment to see this sculpture and to buy NFT. So.
And to add to that, I think, oh, please, Anya, let's have a question. I feel like we're about to start off a discussion, and I quite like it.
That was a really good point, Roger. And I was just thinking about artworks that exist in the present but then don't continue. And as a performance artist, and for most of history, there have been performances and moments that have happened that only existed for that moment and are not able to be brought into the future. So they were happening before there were video cameras, before there was documentation. You might have paintings of performances or drawings of something that happened, but I feel like NFTs aren't the beginning of artworks that cannot be carried into the future in their full form. But it is an interesting point, and I am also a fan of anything handwritten, and anything on paper feels romantic at this point, and so I like the idea of also NFTs being tied to physical objects that might have a longer lifespan than formats that are going to be irrelevant in 10 years.
Yeah.
Would anyone else like to add perspective to this? Yes, Deja. We have another one at the front.
Continuing this, also physical memory as part of decentralization as well. So we think of the blockchain and storing tokens and immutability, but it's only immutable for so long as we have these servers that have that are required to be physically, tied together with electricity. But then we think about choreography and passing on choreography, through storytelling, through teaching, body movements, and of course, this changes as it's passed on. Every time it changes a little bit, but arguably you could say that this way of storing artworks in the physical memory and passing them on might last a little bit longer.
NFTs are a performance art. I like that idea. And that's great.
Yeah.
So I believe it's a really interesting question to look at the question of permanence, because I have seen so many amazing works of art at the Art Basel Fair, which by the nature of their medium do not give themselves well to archival. And I think with digital art and even like the act of NFTs, because they are like a log of transactions, I think what comes into really into play is the idea of archival, which was always an important part of the art world. And it like the question of what will be selected by the present and by the future to be archived and to be reproduced in new forms with digital mediums. The digital data can of course be reproduced and kept up, but one needs to keep putting effort into that as time moves on. It's very fascinating.
I think it's very important not to forget that art is emotions. It's experiences. It's memories. So sometimes it's not a problem if it's not natural and you don't keep it as an object, but just as a thought and feelings.
And I think there's also one final distinction, which is that the art can exist separate from the NFT that underpins it, and the NFT exactly as a historical record of this piece, whether it comes to provenance, whether it comes to transaction history. The way we consume and what we feel about the art isn't bound to the technology. That is actually a separate dimension. It's a component, but it is not the piece in its entirety.
Yeah. It's a tool. It's just a tool.
I mean, that was a fantastic discussion. I'm very, very happy that all of you so actively participated. And Valerie, thank you so much for all of your perspectives.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for you.
Si, si, il en continue.
Hello? Hello? Hi, everyone. Can I please invite you all to take a seat? We're going to start the next panel, and I would also like to invite all of my panelists up on stage with me, please. So come and join me up on this very delicately designed set. So the next panel is titled The Evolution of Generative Art. And for that, we have invited Baptiste Crespi, Dr. Lev Manovich, Eliza Struthers-Jobin, correct me if I'm wrong, and then Michael Zankan, who is dialed in online. So basically, a lot of the discussion, I don't know if many of you have actually already taken time to visit the Tezos booth at Grand Palais and what the experience is there, but a lot of the artworks there are, I mean, pretty much all the artworks there are focused on generative art as a medium, and as a new genre of art in the digital space and how it relates to blockchain technology. And so we've invited pretty much the experts, the artists, the marketplace creators, the researchers, and more with me on stage to discuss how this art form has developed over time, what it means to us today, and what its role has been in terms of the interplay between art, blockchain, and technology overall. So welcome to everybody here. Thank you so much for joining me. We're going to start with a bit of an introductory question because generative art is a very abstract term. So I'd like to understand what it actually means to each of you. So Eliza, why don't we start with you? What is generative art as you see it?
Can you guys hear me? Yeah. Well, for me, generative art is, any kind of art that is dictated by a process that contains an autonomous kind of element to it. It doesn't have to be anchored in code or a computer. Like, it didn't start off there. But given that these are the tools we have today, now this is where it's come. But yeah, for me, that's the most important element.
For me, it's maybe something I have a lot of control over, and yet brings me a lot of wonder, I'd say.
Hi, good morning. Thank you all for coming, and thank you for Tezos for this fabulous barge. I hope it will, by somehow my miracle, sail away. We can just stay here and talk for a few days, and I don't have to go back to a art fair and get a free pass and give it to all my artist friends who kept emailing me for the night and sending me. Anyway, I will wear academic hat to answer this question. So for me, generative art is an art which does use algorithms. And algorithms is not a medium of art, but it's a meta medium, because computer can simulate all the existing media. The computer can be watercolor, oil, photography, and even early generative art. And of course, you can create many new things you couldn't create before. So it's an art created with meta medium of algorithms.
Thank you. And Michael, can you give us your perspective on what generative art is?
I think they said it all. The generative art, the art is in the code, and it's about a process that is not necessarily done by the computer. So nowadays, the tool of the computer is extremely efficient for that task, but it's a common conception that generative art started before computers, and we have the common example of Sol Lewitt, who did processes, and the written instruction on a piece of paper was what he considered to be the artwork, no matter the output.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for the diversity of perspectives on what generative art is as it means to each of you. Obviously, what's brought us all here today is the evolving role of generative art as it relates to blockchain technology. So given the past year or so has been absolutely crucial to the re-emergence of generative art, because I don't want to say it is the emergence, because it is an art form that has existed long before blockchain technology existed. How do you think blockchain has actually brought generative art back into the spotlight?
I guess it comes down to the fact that now there's a framework that allows artists to sell their digital work in the meaning be on blockchain, just because how communities interact and how they enjoy and appropriate collections that are released on chain. And yeah, last year has been quite amazing, and it was maybe last 2 years actually. It has been amazing to see the emergence of generative art and the spotlight it has received. Yeah, I mean, it's been great to see that now some people are getting proper valuation for the work they're doing.
You're right with the blockchain revolution or evolution have brought digital art into spotlight, but it also changed. So while people do get recognition, when I see people who've been working in this field for their whole life, and let's say their work are priced at $10,000 and $50,000, and when people who are 13 or 15-year-old, whose sensations, so their work is priced as digital art for $1.5 million, you know, every revolution, you know, some people win and some people, you know, lose. Whether it is French Revolution, Russian Revolution, or blockchain revolution. And the second thing I want to mention, so generative art is as old as contemporary or post-war modern art itself, right? Music with computers begins around 58. The first exhibition of digital algorithmic generative art, if you want, in visual art is 65. You know, in the 60s it was more actually paid more attention by the art world because art world didn't exist. It was more experimental. It was generative itself. Even art world became more conservative about painting, so it kind of went down. So now we have a new period. It's definitely not the last, and we'll see what's going on. But my concern is that, you know, the people who happen to be in the spotlight today, who are 13-year-olds, we're not the only ones who will get evaluations. That it'll be more of a democratic and inclusive process, and people who've been doing it over their lives, and some is people, and also amazing scholars, you know, people like Roger Molina, people who made it all possible for decades are here, and I hope that we all get a bit of a spotlight as well.
So if we basically offer history a bit of value in this conversation, we're watching something evolve through the onset of new technologies. And so how generative art previously existed is not how we perceive it and consume it now. So then to bring that to the artist perspective, so Eliza and Michael, both of you are generative artists and are very actively participating, you know, in incorporating your work into blockchain. How has this conversation impacted you and the work that you've been creating? Eliza, why don't we start with you?
I've been really slow to kind of enter the NFT space because when it kind of exploded in the last 2 years, there was such a mad rush to get on blockchain and to mint. And for me, when that happens, I tend, like if there's a large group that moves towards something, I tend to kind of stand still for a moment to try and like see what's happening, to understand it, because my motivation for creating art was never financial. Obviously, we all want to live comfortably, but initially when I saw everyone just like getting so excited about the numbers, I was like, ugh, because that's not the conversation I want to have about what I'm creating and why. But I think it's amazing, this question of being able to like really claim authorship over what you do in a real way, which we never had before as digital artists. I think a lot of creators didn't feel very legitimate in creating digitally because everyone's just like, oh, it's there, it's on the internet. I could just take a screen capture. Now we know that that conversation has shifted thanks to blockchain, thanks to NFTs. And so now I'm slowly starting to kind of go in and see my comfortable way of doing it. Everyone's different, obviously, in their approach. But so far, the experience has been exceptional.
So it's taking a very experimental approach and making sure that you keep the distinction between the market opportunity and the impact it's actually having on what you choose to create.
Yeah.
And Michael, what about you? How has this impacted your work and how it plays out on Tezos and the work that you mint there?
Oh, it's impacted hugely because discovering that NFTs existed was the moment when I decided to call what I was doing with code art. This is the very moment, because I've been coding for so long. I started at 8 years old, and what I was doing at 8 years old on a language called Logo Turtle was creating graphics with code. It started there, and so I've been coding all my life, and later on I built a company with the aim of making some graphics, animations, and real-time stuff with code and sell it. but the market wasn't really there. So it took a long time before I could sell my work and my creativity. But then again, I wouldn't have called it art. Instead, my need for creating art was released into something that I found more noble, which was painting. So I've been painting with oils, and in the meantime, I was still coding for commission work, but not really as an artist. Sometimes it was being labeled art, but it wasn't until we could have a proper market available for digital art that it made sense to switch to from this label of being just a developer and become an artist. So it changed everything, starting from the moment there was a market for the digital art.
So it offered you a sense of, I guess, legitimacy in your desire to be identified as an artist and basically having the work that you were, spending hours of your day producing to be considered as something as beautiful and not just kind of a piece of technology or an output of code.
Yes, the sense of legitimacy is key here because as a painter, for instance, I didn't attend any school, I didn't have the labels. So the contemporary art world, well, this was my feeling that it was never going to accept me as an artist because I was a self-made. And this is the same with code. I was entirely self-made. There was no school for generative art anyway. So yes, this legitimacy was gained with NFT and with this new market on the blockchain.
And to bring this conversation of legitimacy back to this idea of the market opportunity, so artists, and generative artists in particular, being able to, earn real money off of their work. I mean, Baptiste, the creation of FX Hash as a marketplace, like how have you seen that evolve over time and sort of the appetite, the commercial appetite for generative art grow on there?
I think in the beginning there was this big rush, like everyone was speaking of FX Hash, but I guess it's a bit true for the whole NFT space. Everyone was rushing because we have appetite for money, of course, because money is the lifeblood for existing right now. And so there was a way to share art and gain money. So of course it was very attractive and a lot of people and artists jumped into this. And there were so many wonderful works being released, but also there was this kind of rush and lack of maybe better understanding of the long term and what does it mean to release many collections, what does it mean to not take care of the work we release precisely. And I feel like for the last year, the quality of the work on the platform has increased so much. And I believe this is probably due to people starting to realize, it used to be FX is a little bit Instagram, but you get paid once you release the piece. And it's a bit the same on Niket Nunk or on platform where fees are really low. And people started to realize that this was not enough, you had to make and take care of the things that you release out there. And really, I think it'd be interesting to actually, make a timeline of the work and maybe even create some sort of process where people could try to evaluate how much they think the pieces are, finished, polished, and everything, and try to see if there's a downward trend, upward
Hopefully
trend
upwards, yes.
going over time,
Yeah.
But I've noticed this visually, and it was quite great to witnessing suddenly technically and beautiful and conceptually amazing project being released out of the blue.
And I think also because, for many people who are interacting on the blockchain, people like me who are not particularly experts within the art world, who are learning how to appreciate generative art for its complexity and also sometimes its simplicity is a new challenge because it is very difficult to, value a piece or decide what you'd be willing to pay for something if you've not really been exposed to that artistic discipline before, which is where I want to bring the conversation to more of the academic side of things and like the.
But can I ask you why you keep why you keep calling me academic? My artistic CV has 128 exhibitions, including 7 personal ones, more than all these people combined. I'm an artist, everybody knows here in the room, so you haven't done your homework.
Well, I would definitely not funnel you down into that, but I do know that...
Sorry, just to give you a hard time, because I love you. but anyway, you should also ask me art questions.
Oh, no, the hard questions are definitely coming. But what I want to ask is how you've witnessed the rhetoric evolve over time, because obviously you have monitored these spaces over a good chunk of time.
38 years.
Exactly, and you've also done a lot of comprehensive research into the matter. So I think you actually have a level of oversight over how this conversation has evolved over time that many of us who are first dabbling into this space over the last couple of years don't have visibility into. So what I'd like to ask you is, how have you seen that conversation play out? Like, what was this conversation, a few years ago where generative art was sort of a lesser known genre, and how has it played out to now?
Yeah. Well, I want to say that in today digital culture, first of all, I hope don't get upset. I mean, I like people, I insult them, it's how I become friends,
I'll take it as a compliment, thank you.
Some of them are sitting in the audience here, right? But I want to say that, so in today's culture, of course, 2 years is like 20 years. Sure. But to bring history very briefly. So as we know, digital art or computer art or generative art, I mean, basically, until a few years ago, generative was used for design. There was the term generative design. So I was very surprised when people adopted it as an umbrella term for digital art. But why not? I mean, why not? It's not any worse or any better than any other term. So people were doing it in the 60s, 70s, 80s. It was a very small number of people. Of course, in the 60s, it was also Andy Warhol, Robert Rauschenberg, it was a huge thing, but then it kind of went down. And then around 89, 91, we have explosion of so-called new media art, with establishment of institutions like ZKM, Arts Electronica, and we had some curators also in the audience. And new media art really explodes, and it becomes its own field of so-called media art, with its own festivals, its own events, and its own tens of thousands of participants. And it's going on, and becomes very successful. So by 2005, those of us living in North America say we no longer want to use the word term digital art or new media art, because it's basically completely everywhere. Little bit we know, but it basically was destined to have another takeoff in the last 2 years. So this is, you can say cycle number 7 or cycle number 70. It's not the last one. So in a few years, we'll call something else. But what I want to say is this, and that's very important. I mean, let's face it. We are now entering the crypto art winter. And I'm here referring to history of artificial intelligence, which had its summers, had its springs, had its winters. In the 70s was a winter, in the 90s was a winter. And now in the last year, artificial intelligence is really having artificial intelligence spring. And we saw amazing success of Midjourneys and GPT-3, etc. So we're now entering winter. So in a few years, in 2 years, most of those people will be gone. We're not going to have patience to stay. But people who will stay in the space, continue educating themselves, continue doing work, and eating like potatoes, rice, we will emerge victorious. So people who are here for long term will emerge, and people who are fellow travelers will disappear. And that's how culture is. Things go up and down. Careers of artists go up and down. So don't be discouraged by the fact that the NFT market is close to zero now. Something like this will emerge, and I think Tezos is, because you guys are smart and wonderful, and you can take my awful jokes, you'll be here in the long term, and I love you.
And that is precisely why I asked you that question specifically. Thank you very much. And so, to bring this back to this idea of, legitimacy and this idea of crypto winter, and basically, those that are continuing to create at a time where it is quite difficult. And I mean, what I want to ask primarily the artists, because I think all of you, as we've just established, all of you here are artists. Generative art had this interesting task of having to legitimize itself recently, because many people who are, involved in the discourse around AI and machine-generated creativity, there is this question of, well, then is it really art if it wasn't created by a human? What is the emotional attachment that we can give this work? And, does it count if it was an automatic instruction if you were just, quote, the coder. So how have you guys navigated this conversation and establishing your legitimacy as artists? Michael, you shared this earlier, but is this a challenge that you still face? Do people still tend to misunderstand the technological component to your work and the creativity it requires to generate that?
Yes, it could be. There could be a shortcut made about generative art, that it's made by a computer, so it's not really human. It's maybe low effort. So we need an entry point for people to understand this is art, and then you get to understand better what is behind the art, what is the process, and how the computers are used to help with this process, and not and the computer are not the origin of the art. But I think that trying to speak with the commonly appreciated codes about what is art and is a good way to let people enter the artwork, and then you get to explain what is behind that. And I found that printing, for instance, the prints, the pink garden monolith that is exhibited at the Tezos booth. Well, I went to the framer with this print, and the framer who sees artworks every day, and he was very interested by the art itself. He said, "Oh, I like this. I've never seen something like that before." So we started to talk, and little by little, I explained to him what was behind. It was created with code. So that was very surprising for somebody who had never heard about generative art. And then we got to speak after a time about the blockchain and how generative art is made out of randomness, and people buy an artwork that they haven't seen yet. So it's a full surprise. And it became absolutely fascinating for that person who is used to see a lot of art. But then when you show a visual that looks like art, then you can have an entry point for the people who are doubtful.
So I guess your experimentation into presenting your art across different mediums, so taking, coded art and bringing it into the physical by having a framed piece, which all of you can actually witness at the Tezos exhibit. If you haven't already gone, I highly encourage it. It's beautiful. It has been a gateway to getting people to start to have this conversation. If their first impression of it is as an art piece, then they are more open to understanding how it was created to begin with, and are unlikely to, I guess, change their opinion after the fact. I mean, Eliza, is this something that you've come across? Because I believe your work is a lot more digitally immersive, or should be consumed in a more digital manner. Is that right?
Yeah, generally I make interactive pieces, and when I describe it to people, usually I say I use code to bend space and time, and that in and of itself sounds like wizardry, and people are very curious about it. And I think also, well, the reaction I get often is, "But you don't look like a coder," which I guess is because I'm a woman. I don't know. That's usually where the conversation ends up. But the people that I speak to, because it's an interactive piece, I guess have more of a context within which to place it as digital art. So for them, it's not such a there's not such a separation between like what is art and like is digital a legitimate platform for art. Yeah.
And Baptiste, what about your own artwork as well, separate from FX Hash? How have you seen that play out in your own pieces?
I mean, I've always used interactivity in my installations to get people engaged in the artwork itself. Usually I try to not especially speak about the fact that it's computer generated and everything, and hope that people will discover it through the installation itself. So my work is a lot about creating artificial ecosystem, microcosm, where people can interact using tools, and like scientists will try to deduce behaviors and try to understand the underlying rules of the ecosystem. And only then they start to realize that, wait, 1 second, it's generated and everything. Well, that's at least my hope. I mean, in practice, they see a screen, so they say, oh, it's generated. But ideally, I would like, these people to only after a while start to understand that this is actually code and everything, and then it ticks, and you have this wow effect. And it does the same with Zancan and his pieces, I believe. This is like the best example that I'm using to introduce people to Gen Art, because you show them the drawings and everything, and you suddenly say, it's code, and it's done with math. And they're like, oh, okay, there's the wow effect. And I believe the wow effect also works well because people now are more introduced to computers, and we were born with computers, and as such we have a certain understanding of how computer works and everything, and that what code is a little bit, and this is maybe why it clicks a little bit faster. But again, like, this is like a very small field of digital art, and using digital components in the artistic installations. We use mostly screens, but there are also many ways to use code and use autonomous systems to, yeah.
So basically it comes down to how we actually engage the audience or the consumer of the artwork, and then how we actually connect them to the technology to begin with. And Lev, I'd like to ask you about, I think you're about to create the TAEX collection. Can you tell us about that? Because that's brought all of this together into one collection, as it were.
Thank you so much. I wasn't sure if I'm supposed to mention it, but I promised to also explore Tezos platform as well. What I saw at the booth is really, really exciting. And what I realized, I will answer in a second, what I realized being in the booth is that we can think about generative as the process of art making, but we can also think of generative algorithmic as a process of publishing and perhaps collecting and perhaps art writing. So in a way, it may be interesting to separate these different processes and to think about how generative can play into all of them, right? So you can create traditional artworks, even publish algorithmic, create algorithmic versions in a publishing stage. So I want to thank Dr. Margarita Kuleva, wonderful Russian, American, German scholar and my best friend, who's curated the TAEX platform, a very young startup. So this morning, as of 2 hours ago, we published a series of my images on their platform. And the images were created using Midjourney and Stable Diffusion platform, which I found, like everybody else, I got totally obsessed by them. This summer, I got sucked in. I made 7,000 images in the course of 3 months, and that's not that much. In the series, I posted early versions on Facebook, and I said, what do you think my prompt was? Everybody said it's Bosch. I said, but not only. People said Malevich, Wilson Rubens, and the prompt was Soviet city designed in the 1960s and painted on large wood panel by Bosch, right? And somehow, from an unconscious, right, of Midjourney and Stable Diffusion, with this amazing database of 5.6 billion image pairs, something came out which impossible to understand. And that's this new, I would say it's yet another kind of generative art when we use these AI platforms. And what's amazing about them, if you let them do what we do, if you don't give them control, if you just say sky, and you get amazing sky. If you say Soviet city painted by Bosch, what does that even mean? I have no idea. So when people think about generative and computer, we think about control, we think about inhuman, we think about cold. In reality, the computers are as unpredictable as human beings, and that's why I love them. And that's why we should embrace them and use them. We can be unpredictable, weird, strange, and totally insane in the most poetic way.
So you've brought up something I definitely want to discuss, which is the emergence of DALL-E and Midjourney as artist creation tools. And what it's enabled people to do is start to experiment with AI generative art and use search terms to try and create interesting and novel pieces. I mean, just as the examples that you've described. So I think in a way that what those platforms have done have acted as a stepping stone or a gateway to understanding how we can interact with, our intent and then the technological output or the visual output, and seeing how code and art can actually coexist in different ways. But do you think that this is going to enable a higher appreciation of coded art, or is it going to present more challenges because now, quote, everybody can do it?
I don't know. For me, what's really interesting about all of this mid-journey stuff is the way it changes how we're relating to how we create with the computer. So now it becomes this really interesting game of like, how do you construct the prompt? And there are all of these different theories about the best way to do it to get the best type of output depending on which platform you're using. Is it, there's Midjourney, there's DALL-E, there's also Replica, I think it's called. No, yeah. And so, like, depending on, you could put the same prompt in all three of them and get a completely different output. If you tweak it, if you add commas here, are you gonna, and you can throw all of these words together that, to us as readers of the English language, would sound just like a jumble, but to the computer, it actually means something very interesting, which, yeah, like you're saying, for us is unexpected, but for the computer, it's like very specific, which is why it's generating that image. So I find that really interesting. Also, that you could repeatedly put the same prompt in and still get different visual outputs. So I think it's wonderful if everyone can participate and see what it means for them to interact with the computer and have them think about why why are they choosing these prompts and what does it mean for them to use a machine in this way.
Yeah, and I think it's also the difference between someone who is freely able to play with these tools versus one that actually develops the skill or like the ability to master a tool with so much variability such as this. I mean, Baptiste, have you played with any of these platforms as well, or?
I'd like to. I don't have much time. But
you get sucked in, so be careful.
I mean, I've been annoyed to see so many of these outputs of Midjourney popping up, although like I quite like the aesthetics and I feel like one of the issues that I have with it is maybe the lack of craftsmanship behind it in a way. I kind of like techno trips like algorithms that are so sophisticated, even if the output is really bad. And I really like this. So that's maybe also why it's so important to me that there's like, I don't know, some hard work or at least like some really well thought process and concept that goes behind producing with text to image softwares. But I'd like to try this, to be fair.
Eliza, would you like to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I don't know that I would believe that the prompt and then the output should be the final product. I've been using it with an artist friend of mine where we'll take images and then, I will add my technique to them and then he will deform the image with his body movement in space and I'll interpret that data in my system. So I don't know if I think it's be it and end all final product, but I do find it really interesting as like an element to add to your practice and play with it and experiment that way.
And just to add to that, it's kind of happening because already some people wrote plugins for Photoshop and Canva. So in a way, it's already becoming another tool.
Yeah.
So so for some it will be final output, and for another it will be just a step in generation. And I think that's a healthy perspective.
And if you make your own data set, and then you put your prompt in, that's a different story. But I think if you're relying on like a global data set that isn't yours, it's different.
So there's a lot of layers to the sophistication of how this can actually be used as a tool. And also it's the idea of suddenly all of our phones have cameras on them, but that doesn't make us all professional photographers. So the expertise is another dimension to this conversation that we have to acknowledge. Just because we all have it at our disposal, doesn't mean we're all going to naturally be good at it. And I mean, Michael, how have you ventured into this? Have you had a look at Midjourney and DALL-E, and have you kind of built your perspective on whether you are pro, anti, or have you tried to experiment in incorporating it into your own work?
No, I haven't at all, because I have been having a sort of allergy to all that is AI. But some artists convinced me that it was not the low effort process that I was thinking about. For instance, I had this conversation with Gambrod, who is a fellow AI artist on Tezos, and he explained to me how much work there was in the process and exploration of these AI tools to come up with a result. And what Elisa said, there is a whole difference between artists who are making their own data set and who have been experimenting for a long time with AI to come up with a process that is really their own and distinguishable. But using those ready-made tools that rely on a huge data set of existing works, artworks from other artists doesn't seem right to me. But also I have, with my past as an oil painter, I made a lot of friends in the illustration world and other painters and people who have been learning for a long time and practicing huge amount of time to become what would be their daily job, illustration. And they are all so scared of what's coming with AI. So I respect that. And this is why I'm a little bit cautious with AI. But there are some artists that I definitely appreciate.
So a little bit like Eliza's point earlier, where sometimes you see a lot of people rush towards something, so you're taking a bit of a moment to evaluate and see how you'd like to incorporate it, if at all, but you're not necessarily going to jump onto this just for the sake of it because it's there.
Yeah. I mean, to that I would add, at this moment with all of the AI stuff is reminding me a lot of when the mad gold rush for NFTs occurred, and I was like, putting my heels into the sand, kind of. And a lot of people who hadn't necessarily coded before just like dove into like all the open source resources and wanted to just grab other people's code to make something and mint it to make a quick buck. And now you're seeing a lot of people who used to freely share their code, and like a lot of the ways that we're learning from each other now as coders, as artists, has changed a lot because people are closing the doors on these things because a lot of people are just trying to grab code and reuse it.
So there's almost an emergence of a defensiveness towards one another.
Yeah, and I find it, I mean, I totally get why it's happening, but I find it a shame because I learned to code, but I started getting into generative art around 2010, 11, and largely because so many people were freely and openly sharing all of their information and being so encouraging online. And now people are a little nervous because there's no credit being given and people are stealing each other's works in a really nasty way. So I get it.
Yeah, it's worrying if we lose that actually, because for me this is one of the best, one of the best things humanity has built, like open source resources made me. So we must think carefully about maybe putting in place tools and being aware of this defensive mechanism emerging from that what's happening with quick cash grabs maybe. And it's interesting to consider, to be fair, because we really cannot lose this.
No, it's an integral part of the community. I mean, it's what makes the community, in my opinion. So.
And I think behind that, looking at the art marketplace, as it were, and Baptiste, to your point earlier, this idea that the way we appraise value for generative art is very different from other art. So, on the one hand, it's the aesthetic beauty, for example, of a Zancan work and how stunning it is framed on a wall, but also to what you were saying earlier, even if the output isn't necessarily pretty or attractive, the sophistication of the code is the thing that made it valuable to you. So how do each of you evaluate generative artwork when you encounter it? I mean, in creating your own collection now, how did you want to demonstrate a sophistication that other people would be able to appreciate openly and readily?
Very good question. And I have a very mixed feeling, right, when I use these tools. Am I allowed to call them my artworks?
Yes.
Or not, right? Because I'm standing right on the shoulders of actually everybody who created, and this 5.6 billion database of images with lots of artists there. at the same time, nobody would exactly create these images like me because nobody exactly has the same kind of cultural database like me. Not many people would think, well, maybe some people would think, but not many people would imagine to combining kind of reference to Soviet kind of utopian or futuristic cyber city planning with 60s and Bosch. But I would say I was trained as a painter since the age of 12. I'm a modernist. That's why I love art fairs, because you go over and you see alternative history more than art. You see artists who were like as amazing as Mondrian, but never made it because he was too close to Mondrian. So if people really want to see the real history of 20th century art, don't go to Pompidou Center, go to the Art Basel, because you see these people who were not included. So I do look at the aesthetics, but I also look at the uniqueness of image. So in my head, I'm trying to have a huge field. Here's all the images humans ever created, all the compositions, all the iconography, etc. And can I make something unique and also something which has the same sensibility as my paintings and drawings, which I made in my 10s and 20s. And it's actually very, very hard to bend with AI tools, which have their own biases, towards a kind of like a concept art, video game, Hollywood aesthetics, to bend them to do something very, very different. But I'm very happy. I'm very kind of happy with this process, precisely because it's very hard. It's like doing etching or engraving. You really have to kind of push the medium to do what you want. Yeah, so algorithm resists.
Yeah, I think it's very much opened up the conversation of how we choose to critique art nowadays and where we derive value and what sort of emotional connection that we have to these pieces as well, because a large part of experiencing art is an emotional connection to what you're witnessing. And so what that looks like, where you derive value from an art piece is going to be, I think, forever in flux. It's not necessarily just confined to generative art as a relatively recent art medium.
I want to literally take 20 seconds. So I said, when we're talking about emotions and soft, and we're saying algorithms are cold and how people are going to like it, but we're so wrong, because if you go to art fair, you're going to see Bozzarelli and Malevich and Mondrian, and the whole 20th century art was about dehumanizing a human, right? Creating abstract art, creating geometric art, creating the human art, breaking the human in cubism, creating this kind of cyborgs in 1920s, German art. So this idea that art is fuzzy and soft, and algorithmic art is cold, that's a very historical perspective. Modern art was about cold. It was about dehumanizing. So if we're now saying, oh, the art is soft, we're being very historical. So that thing makes me nervous.
And I mean, we've only got 3 minutes left on the clock, so I'd like to invite, each of you to add to that point, or we can open up the floor to questions, because I have a feeling that we might have a few out there. And with that, we'll open it up to the audience. Are there any questions? Yes, out in the front. Yes. Can you please use the microphone? Thank you.
Hi, I've got a question to Baptiste, maybe. To me, generative art is really a combination between code and visuals. You were talking about how you appreciate the sophistication of the code. At what level do you think we need to have collectors also understand how the generative art is made, instead of only looking at the visuals? And I mean collectors that are not really used to collect generative art.
I mean, I believe what's really important is to have the resources available for collectors to be able to learn more about generative art and the pieces they like or may like, if they want to. Because, I mean, some collectors will never want to dive into this and just have an appreciation of the visual itself and really don't care about the code. And I really think that if resources are there and made available quite easily, it may improve, the knowledge, the overall knowledge of the collector community. And that's basically was the main vector for building FX Text. So it's an article system where people can write about some pieces, and it's directly displayed on the piece itself. So right now, it's getting a little bit easier if you want to understand a bit more about a piece and the processes behind it, to just go on the piece itself and read what people have been writing about. But it's an ongoing process, of course. It's about providing tools and hoping that eventually there will be these resources being built.
We actually only have 1 minute left on the clock, so I'll allow for one more question. And I believe the gentleman at the back had one at the very beginning, so we'll offer it to them. Or lady,
I'll make it short so the other person can also. So, unfortunately, you've made me think. I work with colleagues in China that organize the annual art exhibition in China, the Biennale. And they actually use AI algorithms to select which artists to show. Initially, I thought this is a terrible idea, algorithmic curating. But then they said, you know, we can put in the biases we want to put in, whereas a curator, you don't know what biases they have. And so, no, I mean, the easy one is they make sure that the artists in the exhibition come from all over China, not from Paris, I mean Beijing. So that they put into the algorithm the biases intentionally. Equal men and women. In China, they don't have gay people. Yeah, no, okay, that's not funny, I'm sorry, I withdraw that. But in fact, algorithmic curating is now beginning. And maybe it's dangerous, maybe it could be liberating to know what biases you put into the algorithm.
Any comments on the floor?
I mean, I don't know. I find it a curious idea to consciously apply biases. It's an interesting conversation to start to think about. I'd never considered that.
I mean, it adds to the entire blockchain argument of total transparency. Exactly. So I guess it lends itself quite tidily there. I mean, we're actually out of time, unfortunately, and I think this is one of the kind of conversations that will exist in perpetuity. And I'm sure, you know, we're all going to be sat down together again at some point in the future to talk about where we've gone to next. So, I mean, Michael Zancan, Dr. Levmanovic, Baptiste Cressy, Eliza Strauss-Jobin, thank you so much for all of your perspectives. It's been absolutely brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you.